So the question was, will AI take our jobs? Some, yeah, sure.
Okay.
Some jobs it will take.
Yeah. Will it take our jobs?
Okay. So I think it's going to change our jobs. Yeah. And some of us are going to have to find something else to do. Okay. That's for sure. Mm-hmm. So if you're, let's say, a trainer, if you're a trainer and the only thing you want to do is stand in front of a class and explain stuff that honestly they could have read a book, then yeah, you're going to have to find a new job.
Yeah. Hi, this is your project management cowboy coming back to you with our next podcast. Now, just recently, I had the pleasure of having a friend and colleague on the podcast, unfortunately, virtually. Shout out to Roy Schilling. We talked about a classic hot topic, which was agile. How fragile is agile? Look it up on our podcast on YouTube. We got a lot of good responses on that. Fortunately, he wasn't here. This time, I have an equally exciting and outstanding project management cowboy with us, Max Langosco. He also knows Roy, so hi to Roy.
Hey, Roy.
We're going to talk about a topic that should probably even blow the topic of Roy out of the water. We're going to talk about KI or AI, depending on KI. I'm talking German already. Artificial intelligence. Now, some of you are probably going to start wrinkling your nose saying, oh my God, not another podcast, another blah, blah on AI. But we want to see if we can't take it a step further. We want to see whether we can't break it down and follow the KISS principle. Keep it simple, short. Or as we say in German, if you can't explain it to a housewife, a 7-year-old, or a board member, then you don't know what the hell you're talking about. And I think we've got the right person for that.
I thought it was keep it simple, stupid.
That too. Good. Max, welcome.
Thank you.
Quick question: how do we know each other?
We know each other. Well, we've been collaborating for a long time, but we met finally in person. Not that long ago, actually, right? Now in January, we were in Dubai. What a cool place, by the way.
Yeah, very cool.
Want to go back? Let's go back.
Yeah, we definitely should take a look at that.
What a conference.
Yeah.
That was a really masterpiece of a conference.
Yeah.
I loved it.
Yeah, it was awesome. Yeah. It was awesome. We both had a seminar there. His was more visited than mine. Of course, he had the better topic. Very good. Standard in our podcasts, I always think it's important for myself, but also for the listener, is that the listener kind of gets a feeling for who you are. Why are you here? What authorizes you? What's your legitimacy in KI?
So that's a good question. I don't know.
So what I like to ask people is tell us a little bit about your background and what I call the passion journey. How did you become what you are? And maybe you want to tell us along the way what you are.
Well, my passion is not artificial intelligence. Okay. It's project management.
Okay.
Right. So and that's why we're in touch, right? I mean that's the main point. Artificial intelligence, hey, cool. That's a tool. Yeah. For me, that's a tool. Now, there's a lot of, you can go at different depths. I'm like right at the surface, right? Scratching the surface.
No, you're further. I'm at the surface.
It's a tool for me, right? Yeah. It's a tool, and I'm not worried about, all the AGI. There's a lot of smart people working on that. Someone will take care of that. But from my perspective, it's a tool, and it's clear that it's here to stay. It's clear that it's going to make our life different, more complex.
Hopefully also easier.
I don't know if it's going to make it easier. I'm not so sure about that. Did email make it easier? Did Excel sheets make it easier? I don't know. But it certainly made it more complex and faster, and it made it more productive. So you need to be on the right side of the productive equation. Let's put it that way.
Okay. So what's your background? Where are you from? Well, it doesn't hear it automatically. Maybe the names gives it away, but...
Yeah. Massilimiliano. Yeah. So I'm Italian. Actually, it's not even true. I'm half Italian, half Hungarian.
Oh.
Yeah, my mom is Hungarian.
Okay.
Yeah. And...
2 times fire.
Absolutely. Yeah. Fire with fire.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I grew up a little bit all over the place. As a child... I was born in Italy, in northern Italy, and by the time I was 1, we were in Guinea, in Africa. Guinea-Conakry. Yeah. And spent a couple of the years there, which obviously I don't remember because it was the first 2 years of my life. Then we moved to Argentina.
Okay.
Right? Then, and there I remember something because I was 4 when we came away. So the very, very first memories are there. Right? And then we moved to Hong Kong.
Okay. Wow.
Yeah.
So your parents were expats?
My parents were expats, absolutely.
Okay. In the business field or?
My father is a geologist.
Oh, okay.
And he was in big construction projects.
Okay.
Who knows? Maybe that's where my love for projects comes from. Yeah, especially these really big, massive investments, right?
Yeah.
That's the stuff I like.
Yeah.
And they were building in Argentina. They were building the bridge over the Paraná, which at the time was
awesome.
the biggest. Very very interesting project. In Hong Kong, they were building this huge double dam, which has sweet water now for
mega project.
Absolutely mega projects.
Wow,
absolutely.
awesome.
Yeah. So I remember as a child roaming around the job site there. It's really, really cool, really cool. These cofferdams with all the water, the sea, there was just really shutting off the ocean from the dam itself. Really cool. And so anyway, that's how I grew up. Then we came back to Italy when I was a teenager. Then I went to university. I had no idea what I wanted to study. I studied in Rome.
What did you study?
Oh, what did I study? I studied business administration.
Okay, yeah. When you don't know what to do.
Right, exactly. What you study when you have no idea what to study, right? I studied business administration. Actually, I wanted to study a bunch of really cool things. I wanted to study archaeology. I wanted to study...
I did too.
Yeah, right? And I'm still wondering why...
Project managers are architects
in a way. In a way, that's very true. Yeah. My mother is an archaeologist,
cool.
by the way. Yeah. And... So anyway, I ended up studying business administration.
Okay.
And it was okay. There were some parts of it that I liked, like macroeconomics and statistics and econometrics and stuff like that. But much of it, I really, the whole accounting, it's really not for me.
Yeah.
And I ended up in hotels. First as a hotel porter.
No, we didn't talk about this.
No,
that's my background too.
Really?
My father was in hotel business as an expat.
Yeah, you're right.
Yeah.
Right.
So
I had heard
the first
about
10 years of my management experience was also in hotels. Interesting.
Yeah. Well, but you were at a different level.
Whatever.
I was really at the reception desk doing the night shift.
I did that too. Yeah.
And I must say, it's I didn't enjoy it, or I didn't think it was going to be my future while I was doing it.
It's
fun.
Now it's completely
it's
underpaid.
Absolutely.
Way too many hours for way too little remuneration. Yeah.
But hey, stakeholder engagement strategies, you learn
Nobody knows better how to deal with clients than people who are in hotel business. Absolutely, yeah.
So that's where I started professionally. I even got myself started at least studying a master in hotel administration. Until a company called Nokia Networks showed up.
Small company?
A small company, yeah. Actually, it was through my brother who knew a friend who whatever. Hey, here's a fax number, send them your CV. Right?
Awesome.
That type of stuff. And I did, and a couple of weeks later, I was working for Nokia Networks.
Wow. In what department?
In projects.
Oh, but we have so much in common. That's how I got out of hotel business. I actually applied for an IT company, and they gave me a job in the Competence Center for Project Management 100 years ago. Yeah, interesting.
Yeah, very, very similar.
We had something. We had certain characteristics. I think they were looking
Absolutely,
for.
Yeah.
So, where did you work for Nokia? In Italy, or?
I started in Milano.
Okay.
Yeah, they were launching a new network for an operator that, in the meantime, doesn't exist anymore.
Yeah, wow.
It was called Blue, and they were still in the tendering phase. So they needed to hire a bunch of people to start this whole project, to show the customer that we had a big network of site acquisition contracts, right? That covered all of Italy, but they didn't know if they were going to win the contract. So they needed people who, with the agreement that if we win the deal, you're in, you stay in. If we don't win the deal, thank you very much, goodbye. So they needed people who could take that kind of risk. I was at the beginning of my career. I loved it, absolutely.
Let me ask you a question, because you didn't have much of a technical background. I didn't either.
I had no idea. I didn't even hear the word project management.
Yeah. So what did you contribute to the project management?
I was the project controller. They needed a project controller. But I went from working in this relatively mid-sized hotel in the center of Rome to running a $150 million project and being responsible for the controlling of that project.
My project was 300 million, was a banking IT project, and I know nothing about banking and nothing about IT. Yeah. I was in the project office back then.
Okay.
Yeah. Interesting.
Yeah, very interesting. And this thing was growing really fast. So we had to set the whole controlling office up. I thought, I've studied about business controlling. How different can project controlling be?
Yeah.
I realized it's very different. But in any case, they had already hired me by then. Mm-hmm. And but that's how you start a career. You dive into the deep end, and then you see if you can swim. And if you can't, well, you'll figure something else out.
Yeah.
And that worked fine for me. What I did realize is that I really enjoyed the project environment.
It's awesome, isn't it?
It's so exciting. It's so fertile. It's so constant.
Dynamic.
Absolutely.
It has a lot similar to hotel business, because in hotel business, although you're underpaid, you're allowed to do everything. You're kind of a free floater. You're a freelancer. You can, if there's a problem over here, you can take care of it.
To take care
Nobody asks you how old you are or what your rank is. If somebody needs to do it, you do it. And that's very similar in project management.
That's right. Yeah. Someone needs help,
and you have to be charming, because most of your incompetence you have to make up with good social skills.
Sure. Yeah. That's absolutely very true. Yeah. So dealing with people and helping them cope with a difficult situation is just as much part of your interaction and of your job as resolving the actual problem.
Did you stick out amongst your colleagues for the skills you brought from somewhere else?
When I was in hotels?
No, when you were in projects.
I don't know really. I guess I've always a little bit stuck out, no matter what.
Because that's what was my experience. Is I once asked my top project manager, "Why did you pick me?" There was like 10 other candidates who knew more about banking and about IT, and he goes, "I got enough specialists in that area. I was looking for somebody who was great at administration, who had good people skills, who could talk to from the beggar on the street to the board member and not be afraid." Those are some of the qualities that they were looking for, and had good presentation skills, which you do too.
Sure. Yeah. So certainly all that played a role. Mm-hmm. The ability to not have any intimidation with people you talk to, that surely played a role. However, the guy who hired me, ciao Marco Bertolotti, the guy who hired me was a technical person. Yeah. In the meantime, had a great career. Last time I heard of him, he was VP for Huawei in Italy. Mm-hmm. And he asked me a few questions relative. What he needed was somebody who kept the maths together in his project, right? And kept the numbers together. And
attention to detail.
And focus on, am I able to try? And he was not an accountant, so he didn't ask me accounting questions, which was very good because that's definitely not my area. Instead, and now I'll tell you a secret. I never told Marco this, okay? A few days before my interview, this was at the time when we were all looking for a new job. Yeah. We were all just came out of university. We were all looking for new jobs. And so one of my really good friends, Ciao Giuliano, who's then later, by the way, I hired into Nokia. Okay. He had just had an interview with another company and told me, "Max, they asked me if I know macros on Excel. What the hell are macros?"
They just asked my son, who's doing a BA in business management. They just asked him that question.
Really? Okay, but
it's still a hot question, supposedly.
Apparently, yes, but it shouldn't be. I mean, this was 25 years ago. Yeah. 25? Yeah, 30. Yeah. Whatever. Anyway, so what the hell are macros? I don't know what the hell are macros. And so we looked, and I looked it up, and I found out what macros are. I found out there's a little thing called a recording, so I knew I could more or less use that. I've discovered that something called Visual Basic exists. And I also discovered that there's a bunch of stuff that you can just copy paste, put it in there. And if you read it, you can kind of figure out what it says, even though I can't write it. Mm-hmm. So this was my knowledge. And Marco asks me if I know macros. Me and macros, come on. And so I told him, well, yeah, I know I can use the recorder and I can read a Visual Basic. I said everything was true, but it was clear that it was very open to me. And so that convinced him that I am a numbers guy and I'm nerdy enough to be part of his team.
And you made up with whatever you didn't know. You made up with blood, sweat, and tears. I'm sure.
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, the midnight. The midnight oil was burnt, definitely.
Did you ever have, so you're an autodidact, like most, it used to be tradition as a project manager that you learned
for yourself
by being thrown in the water. Was there ever a stage where you got some formal training and certification?
I got a certification towards the end of my career in Nokia.
Interesting.
Yeah, I think it was 2006 or 2007.
Do you know Seppo Harminen?
Yeah,
did you work together with him at all?
No, I didn't.
Say hello to Seppo.
Hi, Seppo. Yeah. I know Seppo, absolutely. Yeah. But I know him from later.
Yeah. Okay.
The certification that I did, the PMP certification, was relatively late, 2006.
Okay.
Like that. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. I'm a little bit older than that.
Yeah.
Yeah. Good. So tell us, how did your career progress? Where did you go from Nokia?
Well, first, of course, my career in Nokia lasted very long.
You probably went through several projects in different roles.
Yeah, definitely. I from project controller, then a wonderful person called Silvia Commessati, who was CFO for Nokia Italy, asked me to join her team in finance. And within a couple of months, it was clear that was not going to be my future. Right? And I remember...
I would have guessed.
I remember Silvia. I mean, we got along really well together. And I remember I would go to Silvia, I have to tell her that I really want out of finance and control. And she laughs and she says, "You want to leave my team?" I says, "Yeah, I want to go back to a project." And so, but we stayed in touch from then, and we worked together a lot. Still, me from the project side, and she helped me. By the way, she and a guy called Giulio De Maria, who moved to Peru. I'm getting ahead of myself. The Nokia Italy was in a difficult situation. They wanted in on a big project in Turkey.
Ooh.
I'm not even sure I'm allowed to say this, but what the hell? It's old stuff. And this was for TIM, Telecom Italia Mobile. And TIM, I don't know how formally, I wasn't certainly even party of the talks, informed Nokia that if they want to participate to the bid for the huge, big deal in Turkey, they need to help them out with this small deal that nobody wants in Peru. And so who gets the small deal that nobody wants? Yours truly.
Cool. Yeah.
And so Giulio ended up going down, and he asked me if I wanted to join him.
Very cool.
And that's exactly how it went.
Awesome.
So I ended up as an operations manager in Peru.
Very good.
And hey, you know what? We started that. There was no Nokia networks there. There was no Nokia office. So first
greenfield.
Absolutely greenfield.
Awesome. I love greenfield.
It was absolutely exciting. No subcontractor structure to talk of.
Yeah.
We started by opening a bank account. Yeah. So bank account and finding a lawyer.
So everything you do matters.
Yeah,
awesome.
Absolutely. It was very exciting. Very exciting. I really loved it. I loved the project. The project was really exciting, but I must tell you the truth, I love the people. I really loved the people there.
Yeah.
We created a big team in a very short amount of time, and it was so unified. So there was really this sense of we're in this big thing together. We're doing something that will change. I'll tell you this story. In Peru, before we launched the first digital network, the only network that existed was an analog network. And this was a kind of radio network. So essentially you had these glorified walkie-talkies, let's put it this way. And so fishermen who went out to sea to fish in the morning, then they had their catch, and with these walkie-talkies, they could pretty much only talk to the mafia boss who was in the village where they came from. And so essentially, these fishermen were obliged to go back there to sell their fish. The moment we had our masts along the coast,
they could go anywhere.
They could talk to anybody.
Awesome. Okay.
And so they ended up going to whoever gave them the best price. I was so damn proud of that. Yeah. I mean, you work really hard, but you make a difference, right? You make a difference.
I think a lot of people, it's not, I don't think it's expressed enough. I think there's a magic a magic attraction to project management, especially for not just for young people, but people who are young at heart. The possibility that, one of the pillars of motivation is the higher purpose and learning something new, and both those pillars are covered through project management. The ability to make a difference and to have impact. And the other thing you mentioned is, as far as teams are concerned, you have teams in the line organization, you build up a long-standing relationship. But I think the relationship in a precarious situation is just more intense, even if it's over a shorter period of time.
That's very true. Yeah.
So what happened after Peru?
After Peru, there was this interim period. I came back to Italy, and I was working for the PMO in Italy. We had a very big PMO, very well-structured PMO in Nokia Networks. I didn't know that at the time. I thought that's how PMOs are, right? Later, I discovered that no.
Now, as your function as a consultant, you realize that it's not a given.
No, it's absolutely not a given. But in fact, that's very, very true, right? While I was in Nokia, I got the honor, the chance to get to know one organization all the way down into its detail, right? Now, as a consultant and also as a trainer, I have the pleasure to see many companies very superficial.
I love that too.
Right? So there's
sometimes a little bit more in depth, depending
on the contract.
We get pulled in every once in a while, but
but it's very different.
Yeah, it's different
to actually being part of the team for 10 years.
Absolutely.
Right? Yeah. And so anyway, both these views are very interesting.
So let me ask you a question in the PMO. If you were, I'm not going to ask you what level of maturity they were in, but I'm assuming it was a regional project management office.
It was the Mediterranean. The South.
So
South
like regional.
Mediterranean.
Yeah.
And I was it was a PMO that was doing a lot of things. So at the time, while I was there, I was working with the procurement. So essentially, I was in the PMO, but I was responsible for renegotiating contracts.
So legal aspects, claim aspects.
Mainly money aspects. Yeah.
But I'm assuming you guys did program management. Did you guys do portfolio management as well?
We were very strongly in touch with portfolio management. Yeah. Absolutely.
But I'm sure you did. Did you have sub-portfolios or wallets they're sometimes called?
No, at least we didn't call them like that. What we had was a very strict alignment between the account, which managed the portable, and the actual rollout. That is what we.
Let me ask you another question. Did you have a sponsor for the PMO? Did you have an accountable executive, to put it into different words?
We had the head of the PMO. Is that what you mean?
No, but who did he or she report to?
So the PMO in Nokia Networks 2005 or whenever that was, I have no idea what it is now, was structured like this, that you had regional PMOs. And you had a PMO manager, which was called head of project management services. And the head of project management services had a global referent. There was the global head of project management services, who was part of services, of network implementation.
I'm going to jump ahead. When I consult PMOs and for large global companies, I have this kind of, we say in German, salopp, very, very direct way of saying it. I always ask the PMOs, who's your sponsor? And they always look at me like, what are you talking about? I mean, who's your sponsor? No, projects have sponsors. It says, no, so do portfolios and programs.
Everybody.
Who's your sponsor? And he goes, what do you mean? I said, who do you report to? Who's your accountable executive? And they go, we don't know.
Who do you serve?
Yeah, who do you serve? I'm like, we don't know.
Bob Dylan.
We serve a lot. Of course you serve a lot, but who covers your ass? So and this is what I tell them. I said, you should have a sponsor, and that sponsor should be God,
or the devil.
No, a God. Well, maybe sometimes a God, a saint, a disciple, but it has to be either a God or a demigod. And they always look at me and they laugh and they say, "What do you mean?" I said, because due to the fact that PMOs don't have the same power as other divisions or departments have, the only way that you can have relevance and have impact on an organization if you're reporting to a fairly high level. I always say you have to be kind of the whisperer, the executive whisperer. So were you guys executive whisperers in one form or another?
No, the PMO there had a much more solid structure, if you want. So it was kind of in parallel to the actual execution.
Okay, so you were more operational.
It was very strongly hierarchical, so coordinated globally. But it was very tightly connected to operations.
Okay.
Right?
So was head of operations basically your go-to guy or go-to girl, or?
The head of operations was my go-to guy. No, my go-to guy was the head of the PMO.
Okay.
But their go-to guy was the head
Okay,
of
that's what I meant.
Yeah.
Okay, good. What happened after that?
After that, I moved to the U.S.
Ooh, where to?
To Atlanta.
Ah, very nice, Georgia.
Yeah.
How'd you like it there?
It's certainly nice.
Yeah.
But not my favorite place in the U.S.
Yeah.
I must say,
hot.
It's hot, but I'm Italian.
Yeah.
I grew up in Hong Kong. I don't mind hot.
Yeah.
But no, it's a cool place, and Buckhead's some nice
Oh, you were in
bars.
Buckhead. Anybody who's never been to Atlanta, Buckhead is almost like a different part. It's like the exclusive part of I once stayed at the Ritz up there. Yeah,
and good bars.
Yeah.
Though I must say that my favorite bar was in a very different place, pretty rundown shack called the Northside Tavern.
Okay.
Anybody who ever goes to Atlanta should look up the Northside Tavern. Here's for the Northside Tavern.
Yeah.
And it's probably the best blues bar I have ever seen.
So more
live
authentic.
music every single
Buckhead's
day.
not very authentic.
No.
Okay.
I mean, you arrive to the entrance of the Northside Tavern, you say, I'm not going to exit alive, right? But then you
It's
do.
a culture shock.
Yeah.
So what did you do in Atlanta?
We were rolling out Singular's network. You know, Singular's headquarters used to be in Atlanta. And so that's why we were there. We were rolling out the Singular network, and I was the cost and progress manager for the whole Singular contract. Yeah.
Good.
And it was cool. It was very cool. So I was doing cost versus progress and risk management. Very cool. Very cool. I mean,
This is like endless. You got like a career for 5 people.
Well, that is just the beginning, right?
What happened after Atlanta?
After Atlanta, I moved back to the PMO, but in North America.
Okay.
So at the time, there was this role that they called the Project Management Services Product Manager, which is essentially the guy responsible for
crossover,
for methodology and for negotiating or negotiating the project management part in tenders, right? So you bring in the whole project management knowledge, right? Very interesting, fascinating, loved it. And then I supported the setup of the PMO in Middle East and Africa, based in Dubai. Was there for a while. And finally, maybe you remember Nokia Networks and Siemens Com merged.
Yes, I remember that.
Yeah, to create Nokia Siemens Networks. And I essentially took up the role of the project management services product manager for global.
That's like an MBA in itself, probably several MBAs in itself. Working with such a large company that has such a wealth of knowledge and structure and standard operating procedures, and you working in project gives you kind of liberty as to kind of ad lib. Yeah. So that's brilliant.
Yeah, and to contribute to that.
Yeah. So when did you become a consultant? When did Mephistopheles, the devil, jump out of the burning bush and say, come sign the contract in your blood? Yeah, when did the temptation to leave the straight and narrow and become a consultant come about?
When the oxygen was too rarefied for my taste.
Yeah. Towards the end of Nokia, or
that was the end of Nokia for me. It was still very interesting, but there was far too much politics involved. This was the full impact of the merger was there. I was in the headquarters of Siemens.
Or Siemens.
I was with Siemens Nokia. Yeah, I was in the ex-Siemens headquarters where everybody was pretty pissed because Nokia was in reality taking over. So anyway, it became too political for me, and I wasn't enjoying it anymore. So at a certain point, I said, you know what? Here's my resignation. Thanks a lot. And I had no idea what I was going to do. When I left Nokia, I had no idea what I was going to do. Yeah. I left because it was not me, and I enjoyed every day with Nokia until I didn't anymore.
I think this is what I tell people when they're in relationships. Some relationships end. Doesn't mean that the relationship was bad. And from what I think, if one listens to you, one can tell the great passion that you have for Nokia.
I loved it. Yeah. I loved it. I still love it. Yeah. I think I'm one of the few who then bought Nokia phones once Nokia phones didn't exist anymore. Right. But in any case, the point is that a time came when it was not fun anymore. It was too much politics. This whole merge thing didn't work out. As far as I understand from my colleagues that are still there, it then smoothed out. With time, it then smooths out. But at the time, it was very rocky. The place where I wasn't enjoying it anymore. In any case, I quit. And I resigned, and it was not healthy anymore. Mm-hmm. So I resigned, and this was in June. My kids were small, ish. They were like something like 11, 9, and 7, something like that. And I thought, you know what? I'm going to spend a wonderful summer with my kids and my wife. And after that, I'll figure it out. Mm-hmm. And that's exactly what happened. And the summer was great. But September came. And my kids went back to school. Mm-hmm. And so I had to decide what to do. And so I was thinking, before going back to another corporation, let's try this freelancing thing. Mm-hmm. And I'm still trying it. Yeah.
Good. When did that start?
That was 2008.
Yeah, well, you're doing okay.
Yeah.
You're doing good for yourself. And like I say, we work for some of the same companies, so yeah, good. That's a long passing journey. Thank you for sharing. We've invited you to talk about artificial intelligence. What's your relationship? Where's the connects to artificial intelligence?
There is no connection, or rather, my son really knows about artificial intelligence. I have no clue.
Okay.
So that's the connection.
He's telling you a fib, but
my interest is project management. Mm-hmm. My interest
I like the fact that you're committed, because I know a lot of people who are into project management who are now putting another flag up, which is also okay if they want to do it. Right. But I like the fact that you're sticking to your guns and saying, no, project management is my home.
Right. My AI is my tool.
Yes, but what I like about it, and that's also you didn't talk just about that, but you talked amongst others about that. You compared to a lot of project managers have not been sitting on your hands. You've actually been studying the material and said, okay, what needs to happen, right. Okay? That's right. Which I think, if I can kind of jump ahead, this is my personal sentiment, and I think a lot of people have this sentiment. We are just constantly being inundated on Instagram and on LinkedIn. You're a loser. I'm going to put it into simple language. You're a loser because you don't know about AI, and AI is coming whether you like it or not. I recently saw an Instagram post from Mark Cuban, my lookalike, my wishful twin.
I thought I was talking to Mark.
Well, you're talking to Mark, the wrong one. But he said, companies that don't adopt artificial intelligence are going to go the way of the dodo. I don't know if that's true. I don't know if that's completely true. I don't know if that across the board can be said for all industries. And the other thing, which I'd like to kind of discuss with you, is also in what time frame are we talking? But I personally feel that a lot of the decision makers are completely out of their depth when it comes to artificial intelligence. I think most people don't really know what it is other than ChatGPT, and it's much more than ChatGPT. We constantly hear the danger of generative AI is going to take over the world and we're all going to be its slaves. That's such a small percentage of what we actually need to be talking about when it comes to artificial intelligence. And I want to kind of pick your brains, what your thoughts, because you've looked at some of this and I find you well versed in it. By the way, just for kicks, what I did is I sat down with, I just kind of badmouth ChatGPT. I actually work with it, and I'm following yours and Alyssa's guideline. I'm always polite to ChatGPT because you never know when it comes and starts looking into your bank accounts.
Right.
So I said, well, since we're going to do a conversation about ChatGPT or AI, actually, I'm going to ask ChatGPT if it can suggest some questions that we can ask, and I thought it was fine. And here's a shortly, we don't have to go through all of them. Ethical considerations of AI, impact of AI on employment. I think that's a hot topic. We can talk about a little bit. AI and decision making, interesting. Sustainability of AI development, I don't know. Bias and fairness. Global governance. Future of AI and human internet. I think that's interesting. I think you might be able to say something, at least from a project management perspective. What innovations there are, literacy. We don't have to go through all these. Are any of these jump out at you?
I mean, they're all very actual topics. They're all the topics that are very relevant. Honestly, most of those topics, there's a lot of stuff online that you can read. AI and ethics, yeah, sure. But why, excuse me, is it very different in other areas? Are there any areas in your professional life where you say, no, ethics doesn't really matter here, right? So why shouldn't it matter in AI? Of course it does. The question is, what problems does it generate?
Yeah.
What issues are we then touching? And if we look at those, then it goes through all of the other questions that you had, right? What's the ethical approach of using these tools relative to the job market? What's the relative, and so on and so on, right? So it's a little bit of transversal thing. I mean, we could. Which one do you want to go first?
You know what? I think since we focus on project, program, portfolio, and PMOs, also general management stuff when it comes up. Maybe you can talk to the project managers out there who might say, "Listen, Max, can you give me some kind of heads up? How is AI going to change my project management, my program management, my PMO?"
What? How about I tell you what I did? And then everybody can decide whether it fits with them or not.
Yeah,
right?
good.
The way I see it is, I'm still interested in delivering value to my customers. That's what a project is about. That's what I'm interested in. So the question is...
So your premise hasn't changed and your objectives haven't changed.
No.
You're just using AI as an accelerator.
My values haven't changed.
Good. So you have a compass. Very good.
But I can... Now, there's a new tool. Let's see if it's useful, right? And I'm looking at AI as a tool, okay? So I'm not talking about AGI and what might come. I have no idea. I'm not in that field. I have no idea if there will be an artificial general intelligence. I assume so because everybody's saying there will be. And I don't know what the implications of that.
I don't know if we're going to want it then, but that's a different story,
right. I am talking about the AI that we have now, right? Or rather with what we call AI right now. So this stuff here, these tools that we have, this is what I'm interested in. And I'm interested in seeing if it can make the life of project managers more successful. And honestly, the answer is absolutely yes. Okay.
Can you give us some real straight, because you recently took me through, for one of the clients that we sometimes both work for, you took me through, even on ChapGPT, which is probably not the preferred AI for in-house, but you showed me that even with ChapGPT, you can do some pretty nifty stuff.
Sure.
That my attitude towards AI changed rapidly after that. Yeah. Okay. I was like, wow, if it can make my life easier and take this crappy work off my hands, I'm all for it. Yeah. So maybe you can give us some use cases on how can a project manager, a PMO, a program manager, a portfolio, what use cases can they use in AI that will make their life easier?
Right. You have at least 5 different questions packed into that. Let's start with the most obvious one, right? What can the project manager do? It's like any maturity development. In any maturity model, right, you will have a first level, a second level, and so on. It's the first one, you just need to understand the topic, figure out what the lingo is, at least that we know what we're talking about. So the very first step for any project manager who's interested in this, and they should be, is know about it, right? What's out there. So get interested in it. There's a lot online. Get interested in what the tools are, and there's plenty of them. You mentioned ChapGPT. Sure, you want to start with ChapGPT, by all means, go ahead with ChapGPT. But I mean, there's a bunch of stuff. There's really a lot of tools out there. However, that's the first step. The second step is understanding how you can use it in order to integrate parts of your organization better. And that's the standard second level of any maturity model, right? You're looking at specific processes that you're going to optimize. And so once you know that, for example, you're using it in order to make it easier to run your emails, you do translations easier, you're using it in order to evaluate your reports, put in a bunch of data and bring out the main points. That's all ABC stuff that you will be doing right away the moment you buy yourself a ChatGPT Pro access, right? But the next step is, okay, how does this combine together? And so the point there will be collaborating with others, with your key stakeholders, with your customer, with your vendors, and aligning the work that you're doing. And AI can help a lot in that. Right? So you can, at that point, really you can start coordinating databases, coordinating best practices in order to have a common way of working across the field. The next step is then departmental, at least departmental. So you will be using AI in order to work better as a company. So for example, you'll have your lessons learned databases that today, how do we do lessons learned today? I mean, even if we use retrospectives and whatever, what do we have? The best case, we have a bunch of documents that nobody ever looks at. Yeah. Come on, whoever.
And if you need to find anything, you don't know where to look.
Right. Mm-hmm. Right. So in the best cases, we have a repository which has some decent keywording, mm-hmm. and if we really go look for something, we might find something. Mm-hmm. But imagine that all that is now trawled through by an AI. Mm-hmm. And you're telling him, hey, this is my next project. Mm-hmm. And what can you tell me? Right? And now from 20 years of corporate history, you start generating knowledge. Could you give me the best practices for contracts with vendor ABC?
Now, see, this is where the gold is. I think this is what most people are not aware of.
This is level 3. Yeah. You need to get here first.
Yeah. Right? So you have to create a certain fluency in the subject matter, the basic principles of. I think the other thing that we kind of flew over, and I heard you mention it the first time, and it caught my attention, is that ChapGPT is a model, but the problem with using ChapGPT in whatever version it is, it's an open source thing, and companies are not going to share or allow ChapGPT to access its confidential data. Okay, so but there is a possibility of creating your own GPT, right?
Right.
Is that what's referred to as a large language model, or is that something else?
That's something else.
Okay.
Yeah. No. Large ChatGPT is using large language models.
Okay, well let me just take a step back. Maybe we can use some old vocabulary for the old farts like me out there. One term that we learned a long time ago was the concept of a project management information system, which way back when we were working in project was basically a bunch of Bene folders on a shelf, and then it eventually became a server where you put stuff on. Then if you worked with Lotus Notes, you had those little databases, exactly, and now you have SharePoint. But actually, what we need to look at from a project management perspective is updating our understanding of what is our IT infrastructure that supports projects, programs, and portfolios, right? And I just looked at it. I was listening to a workshop yesterday. What's the name of the Microsoft tool that do you know what I'm talking about? Copilot. I was amazed, and I felt like Brave New World. It has this whole Microsoft 360, which I've heard 100 times and went in one ear, not the other. But I've heard some feedback about Copilot. It's not quite there where it needs to be, but it's Microsoft. It's going to go there.
It's going to get there.
It's going to go there. So what I thought was amazing about the presentation is that, I mean, simple. We're talking level 1 to give you a pragmatic example. A lot of teams are working virtual because that's the nature of the beast since Corona, right? So a lot of home office. You have a lot of meetings online, which are a pain in the butt. Now it records what you say. Big Brother is watching, right? It tells you who said what. It registers keywords. If you talk about, for example, since you were talking about budget, if you're talking about a particular client, right, and you talk about some of the stipulations that you want to put into the contract, it can compile that and go to previous contracts and adjust or give it. They can give you a pitch deck. I was like, but Jesus, I mean, it's just, I mean, Brave New World. I mean, we are all used to a certain level of automation, but we are really on the dawn of a new age because all of this happens like this, and none of it is. It scares me in the sense of, can we learn it that quickly? But it doesn't scare me in the sense because actually it's taking work off my hands that I want to do in the first place.
Right, exactly. You never wanted to do that.
Yeah. So that's like level 1. But so creating your own GPT or large, maybe you can still.
Very expensive.
Very expensive?
Yeah.
Prohibitive?
Prohibitive for small pockets like mine. Yeah. So
I'm going to ask you a pragmatic question. What size of company should you be before you consider creating your own GPT?
Well, so we're talking several tens of millions, right?
Okay.
So no, that makes sense, but it makes sense if you say I have such valuable proprietary data that I actually want to create my own model and I want to train it myself and I want to run it myself on my own hardware and so on and so on. You're talking a lot of money there. But that's not where you will have a few big players who's going to go, who actually are already there. So
SAP, for example.
SAP actually is, okay, in any case, yeah. Well, I don't want to talk about SAP, but there are a few companies that are going there, and they should. It's wonderful, great, but that's not where, for example, consultants are going, right? I mean, that's not the type of pockets that we have.
Yeah.
But what we can do, and that's what, for example, I'm doing with the PMR2 in efforts, is to use the existing tools, for example, the existing LLMs, such as, for example, GPT-4, in order to use it for our purposes. So I create a front end that manages the GPT-4. Right?
So let's take a step back. So if you're not willing to spend $10 million, you're going to have to wait a little bit longer, right? So in the interim, if I'm a smaller company,
forget about the interim. Why would you ever want to go through the hassle of building your own model if you don't need it?
Let me then ask you a more direct question. Is for a lot of the use. So let's be concrete what I mean with use.
There's a huge amount of stuff that you can
when
do.
we talked a couple weeks ago, and I was kind of reluctant. Oh my God. I mean, I always like talking to you, but I kind of got a last minute request. I have to talk to you because you did a presentation for a client. And
that's right.
The same client.
And
AI. Okay.
Dr. Max. Yeah.
And I'm going to use a real life because I think this is where you can sink your teeth in. If you said, okay, let's pull out ChatGPT. I said, okay. Then I said, okay, let's say you have a request for proposal. Put the request for proposal into ChatGPT and ask ChatGPT, which I didn't think you had to prompt it that way, what is the document? And it gave it a great summary. I'm like, wow. I mean, it knows who, what, how. And then you started taking me through what I call the planning cascade, right? You said, give me a risk analysis, give me a risk matrix with colors and split up into 4 different things. And you can give it order. I'm like, what? And then stakeholder analysis. Then you could ask it like smart questions, like why do you rank this risk lower or this stakeholder? Why didn't you give it more?
It tells you.
And it tells you. And then you could theoretically say, okay, if you have a request for proposal, you could actually take your own template. Your own template that you have, as long as it's not too it's too complicated. It kind of slows down and tells you.
It makes a copy of it and tells you, hey, this is what I can do.
But I put in a simple template and it filled it out for me. And from that perspective, this is my question to you: can I do this with ChatGPT?
This is ChatGPT. This is $20 a month of ChatGPT. This is all it is.
And the question is, if I were a decision maker in a company, and I know that this is a possibility,
every employee would have access to it.
I don't want this just for 1 or 2 people. I want this to be part of my system.
Absolutely.
But then I'm going back to the question of, can I work with this open source thing? I don't know if that's the right term or not, or do I have to have a closed source thing? Where do I provide the system with access to my previous contracts? So that it can aggregate, because you were talking about knowledge management.
Yeah.
Okay. So there's concerns.
Right.
Okay.
Today, so it used to be that OpenAI, that is the company that owns GPT-4, which is the model that we're talking about, was actually using the data they collected in order to then retrain the models.
Yeah.
What this meant is that the information that you've provided is not going to be copy-paste in the next, but it could pop up somewhere and you don't really know where it might pop up. Right? And you don't want that if that's your proprietary. Now, what OpenAI is saying is if you are contributing information into a paid account, they will not use that data. So now the question is, how do you trust, right? I don't know.
Do you trust TikTok? Do you trust?
Well, I certainly wouldn't trust TikTok. But the point is, so do you trust them? I don't know. I guess to a certain degree, if it's not too risky for me, I'll trust you. Of course, if I have some super innovative technical solution, I am not going. I mean, trust is a measure of vulnerability, right? Are you accepting vulnerability? That's what trust is all about. So you need to decide how much vulnerability are you ready to tolerate.
But this is, let me ask you, if I were to come to you as a client and you're my consultant, would I be able to ask you these questions, and could you help me navigate to what level we access it, and you could help train my team, because level one. Let's start. Quite honestly, I think most companies would be happy if they have level one. I think actually, in the sense of acceptance, I think most employees would embrace AI even at a more complex level if at the first level there was some return of investment. You get kind of the classical WIFM, what's in it for me?
Right. I mean, and there is a lot. Yeah. There's really a lot in it for you. So the practical usage is where the most low-hanging fruit is. So you really want to teach your employees to be able to use these practical, these simple tools. You don't want to make it too complicated. That'll come later. But first they need to feel comfortable with it. If they don't feel comfortable with it, you will never get to the next step.
Yeah.
So how do they get comfortable with it? Yeah, they get comfortable with it with simple tools. You mentioned Copilot, ChapGPT.
I was impressed with Copilot. I mean, it was intimidating because it's just so new to me, but it made so much sense that now, it'll do my minutes. I can transfer it into Excel. It'll give me my action items. Yeah. It'll send out to-dos.
Yeah, but this is just this is the lowest hanging fruit.
But even if it's the lowest hanging fruit, I think that's where we emotionally need to start, because I think everybody's already looking at a generative AI, which is, I don't know.
This is generative AI.
Well, I'm talking about what everybody's afraid of.
You're talking about the artificial general intelligence.
Yeah, that's what I mean. Yeah. Everybody's afraid of that, but what does that make up? 5% of the focus right now, or even less?
No, I mean, there's a lot of people working on it, but they're not at our level.
Yeah, but it's not what the industry is waiting for.
The industry is waiting for it.
Yeah, but the industry is not even digesting what it has right now.
Right, that's correct.
So we're talking low hanging. So these are some real life examples of how it can help. But let's go back, because in German, I don't even know what the German thing STVGO.
What?
You never heard of this?
No.
It's a European guideline, or maybe it's German, Austrian. Where
GPDR.
Oh, the GDPR. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thanks for
the
real knowledgeable. What's it called? GPDR?
GDPR. Yeah.
So what the hell does that mean?
It's the
rules,
the privacy
and
stuff. Yeah.
Question, because I've heard that's an issue with ChatGPT. Is that an issue if we were to use it on a level 1?
Yeah, sure.
Yeah.
So GDPR applies to a bunch of stuff, including, by the way, now recently the European Union has launched the new regulations for AI, and they are going to become active in the next couple of years.
That's what they say, yeah.
Yeah. So, I mean, yeah, sure.
They're also going to get rid of homelessness by 2035.
Really? Good. Very good.
I thought I'd let you know.
Yeah. So I'll have a home finally. Okay, cool. Okay.
No, some of the ideals that the European Union had are valuable, but questionable whether they're doable in that time frame. But okay. So that's level 1. Are there any other applications that you can think of for projects, programs, and portfolios that would be interesting at level 1?
Look, using these existing tools the way they are is really it's like you say, I've learned to use my email. Yeah. Okay, there's no honor in it. Yeah. You've just learned the basics.
Yeah.
But it's like saying, how great that we have internet because we can use the email.
Yeah.
Right. That's essentially the. Of course, there's a lot more that you can do.
I like that analogy. What you're basically saying is that Outlook is not proprietary in the sense of it's owned by Microsoft, but it's not owned by the user. It's owned in the sense that it's a license and that they use it and it's a tool, and companies still find a way to make it work, although it's an open source software.
And you can build your own ways of using these tools.
Yeah.
Right.
So you can
fit whatever it is
add security layers to it. Is that a possibility with
Sure. You can add security layers to it. But the point is, it's not just a question of summarizing your emails.
Okay.
It's not just a question of.
Could you use, I'm sure you could use AI to say, go look through my Outlook and pick out the client information in this area?
You can do whatever is necessary for bringing value to you.
Okay.
So the question is not what can AI do? The question is, do you know what's going to bring value?
Okay, so you get lost with too many. Okay.
Forget about that. That's a tool, right? It's like, what can I do with a hammer? Well, yeah, okay. The point is, what does it bring value to you? So that's where you start from.
Okay. But this is what I'm saying. The problem with understanding the value thing, I think, look, this is something I constantly say, and this was recently given to me in a feedback in a seminar I gave, and I appreciated it because it's something I truly believe. I think the world is full of people that tell you what you should, that AI is relevant, and you should do this, and you should have earned value, and you should have a PMO. Everybody tells you what you should have. Everybody knows what. I mean, it's not like we don't know that. I think the real problem that people have is, okay, if I want it, what do I have to do to make it work? I think the how is the big challenge.
Just keep talking. I'm just going to fix the mic.
Thank you. So how, number one, you need to know what you want.
Yeah.
And in most cases, when I talk to a client, the first problem is that they don't know what they want.
So let's go back to this roadmap concept. I've heard this several times over, although I think for most company it's a blah blah excuse. In your case, I would probably make the exception. You're thinking a little further. So what you're saying is the first step to embrace AI in a company is to have a strategy workshop up front. Is that what you're saying?
Okay, no, we're talking about different levels. Okay. One thing is the maturity model, right?
Okay.
And by the way, with Swiss Management Training, we're working on this maturity model, and it has these 5 different levels and whatever. So
do you share, or do I have to pay a lot of money to access it?
You have to pay a lot of money, of course.
Okay.
No, I'm super happy to show it to you and to get your feedback.
Yeah, because before, I mean, I'm working on maturity models on different other levels, and I don't want to reinvent the wheel. If there's something that we can share and I can promote you a little bit, I'd love to do that. Yeah.
Absolutely. So in any case, that is a maturity model, meaning I have a company, I want it to grow from an AI perspective. What do I need to do?
So you like to paint, if I'm going to put this, tell me if my analogy is correct. You want to paint a big picture with perspective, immediate perspective, midterm, long-term, very long perspective.
Your roadmap,
so kind of like an oil painting in one of those big Italian oil paintings where you can get lost in it. You have different layers, so that's where you would start, so that you know the landscape.
I don't know about the oil painting, but plus I'm more of an impressionist type. But the point is, if you have a maturity model, that can help you to guide you in your growth. Okay. And the first step is what I was saying earlier. Get your lingo right. Yeah. Right. Learn what tools you have. Use them at a very basic level.
Okay. So what are the basic tools that
it's the ones that you said earlier, right? It's all the stuff that you were talking about earlier. So Copilot, ChapGPT, whatever, all that stuff. Start using it, right? And of course, you want a workshop to give you direction. Why not? There are plenty of workshops out there.
Okay.
Next level is the second level that I was saying. You choose specific areas of impact. For example, I want to streamline my relationships with my customer, with my vendor.
So CRM.
Whatever. So at that point, you can use AI to streamline that. Third point level, you're creating a methodology that structures the whole organization. Extremely powerful, extremely risky, right? So. And here is where your lessons learned databases come into play and all that type of stuff there. So that was point number 3, right? Where you have this methodology that you bring all together. By the way, that level number 3 is the one that generates the biggest amount of value.
Question, would you share a graphic of your maturity model so we can put it on the screen so people can look at it?
Sure.
We'll put link to your company as well if people, in case, want to reach out and get more details.
Absolutely.
Okay, great.
Sure, thank you. So the level 3, therefore, is the one that brings most value. It's hugely risky, right? You really need to know what you're doing when you're moving. Because
so the first 2 levels, it's organic growth as far as that can be used as a terminology, but you have to have the first 2 levels down solid before you get to the third.
Absolutely. Okay. Absolutely. And there's a lot of companies that are rushing it.
Yeah.
Right? But in any case, the first 2 levels means I take the advantages where I see. Low-hanging fruit, level 1, a little bit higher, level 2. But in any case, I'm just picking fruit that would have fallen off the tree.
Yeah.
Level 3 is a different beast. At that point, you are really integrating but that's where the value lies. For example, earlier we were talking about the lessons learned stuff, right? By lessons learned, I don't just mean, this was my lead time. I mean everything. I mean your contracts.
That's where I'm thinking.
Right? Your contracts with your customer, with your vendors, your technology, how it improves.
Let's make it even more KISS. We talked about this during the break. I envision, we have a lot of large clients who use project management as a vehicle to deliver their products and services, be it a dam, a bridge, a huge IT system, right? So project management is a core part of it. And part of the project management lifecycle is discovery and evaluation, doing contracts, filtering through different requests for proposal, going through the legal aspect. These are all things you could, or even planning a project. For example, if I'm planning a project that I've done several times before, not all projects are that unique, right? So I've done a project several times and I have to use this very fancy cost calculating method. If I have an AI, I can say, listen, these are the parameters of my project. You can go to a repository or some kind of background information, say, well, this is comparable based on these keywords. It's similar to this project, and based upon that, I can calculate, to use PMI word, an analogous, or hold on to your pants, parametric, look it up, parametric estimate of a project. And quite honestly, I think most project managers would fall over backwards with joy, because let's face it, how difficult is it for an external project to calculate the cost of the project? Yeah. Because your butt is on the line if you miscalculate.
Yeah,
right.
That's absolutely correct. Do keep in consideration a fact: most of these are language models.
Yeah,
meaning they are not necessarily very powerful with calculations.
Yeah.
So they can do a lot of cool stuff, but you always need to pay.
Yeah, so that's a huge important message. Just because it does it quick doesn't mean you don't have to double check it.
Exactly. Yeah.
It's not always as intelligent as we think it is.
No, it's actually stupid.
Yeah. Thank you.
Yeah, it's actually really stupid. So
But it's fast.
It's fast, and the results are pretty damn interesting.
Yeah.
So the only thing it knows is, here's a big chunk of information. Give me something, right? And you need to re-give this chunk of information. Anyway, the point is, yes, absolutely, you can go through all this re-evaluating of contracts, of lessons learned.
What level would that be in your scale, would you say?
If you
Between
do
2 and 3?
If you do them one at a time, it's level 2.
Okay.
Right? So if you say, I'm only doing to review contracts. Right. If you only do one, I'm only reviewing contracts.
Okay.
Right. I'm. If you do one at a time,
but you probably also need internal guidelines for that, right?
Sure.
So what prompts you use? What are the regulations? Right. Here's a process.
You can build tools for this, and that's exactly what we.
So you can to fill the gaps, and this also goes back to our security issue. You can build additional add-ons to the system that can be your own, which provide a certain level of security, right?
That's right. So. And by the way, much of these tools that you're building are taking the intelligence that the AI is giving you, combining it with your proprietary data, and now giving you a result. This way, you're not sharing the proprietary data anymore, right? You're just taking a mechanism, a logic, and then applying it. Right?
But this requires a huge amount of integration between multiple departments and levels of an organization to make that work.
If you arrive to level 3, yes.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. And that's exactly why it's so risky, right? Yeah. One fails, all fail. Right? But if everybody works well, it's extremely powerful.
Okay.
Right?
So that's level 3. What's level 4?
Level 4 is benchmarking.
Nirvana.
No. Yeah, that's level 5. That's level 5.
Yeah.
Benchmarking.
Okay.
Benchmarking. You're constantly comparing yourself. This is an extremely dynamic field, and we benchmark even much slower fields.
When you're saying benchmarking, you don't just mean internal, you mean external as well,
I mean,
right?
both.
Okay, good.
Both, absolutely. Yeah. Also internally.
Yeah.
Your internal benchmarks are very, very important, right? Because you have certain targets, and you need to follow up. Am I doing well, right?
Yeah.
However, yes, absolutely. External is very important because this is an extremely innovative area, and so you need to know what's going on, right? So benchmarking, and then therefore creating this flow of improvement, right? Level 5 takes that flow of improvement, internalizes it into your systems. So essentially, you normalize change, right? You are creating a way of working which is constantly pushing to the fail point and using that fail point in order to automatically change, right? And this, by the way, is not true only for AI. This is true for a lot of different maturity.
Yeah, I think there's an ancient cosmic wisdom that can be tracked back to maybe more analog concepts, but it's the same principle. So you're the one who developed this maturity model or adapted it?
The basic logic of the maturity model is the same for many maturity models.
They're all very similar, but you've
I've adapted it to the AI.
Very good. We're definitely going to share that because I think before we create one ourselves, I think common language and common reference points is helpful.
And by the way, feedback is always well appreciated, right?
So okay, good.
This is something that is just started and it's growing, and all feedback is really valuable. This is, however, because you had a very clear question, what does this stuff mean in practice, right? So if I'm looking at it, if I'm the CEO of a company and I want my whole company to grow, then this is how I'd look at it. I'd look at this maturity expectations and I'm saying, we're down here and in the next 2 years we're going to get to the main points of level 2, but I see a further path. The contrary to this is the individual's perspective, right? I'm a project manager. I'm overloaded with all sorts of chaos. I can't even catch up with myself. The last time I hit a Friday afternoon when I finished all I wanted to do was like when I was 6. And what do I do? How can this help me? Right? And that's a completely different story.
With a lot of the things that are time consuming, I mean, one of my big pet peeves that I don't think most people understand enough, most people refer to portfolio management. The standard in portfolio management and project management is this then. But in reality, you can't do portfolio management unless you integrate financial portfolio management, product portfolio management, and project portfolio. It's a triumvirate. It's the holy trinity, I call it.
That's true.
And for me, if you were to ask me, if I were to try to be visionary, I don't know how we would do it from a software or a hardware perspective. But one of the things I think that could absolutely revolutionize the project management world is, because I think the biggest weakness we have in project management today as a community, global community, is the lack of sufficient portfolio management. So as an executive, I would love to have a clear overview of how many projects I have. I would love to have a clear overview of what is my total annual budget that I'm spending. Okay, I have some kind of a triage of what projects. There would be some kind of pre-selection process based on criteria that we could set. That it could quickly filter through 1,000 suggestions. Even if a client, if one of my employees, if I have an open door policy, at least electronically, that one of my clients writes down a one-page summary, and it's put into the system, and the system already pre-selects whether or not it's in line with my strategy.
You don't need AI for this.
I don't know if it's AI that we need for it, but we need it
badly.
And I don't see it. So that's why I play the DAO in this podcast. I'm the dumbest assumed user, but that's at the end of the day, I can channel a CEO who says, I don't really give a crap what you call it. Right. Give it to me.
Right.
Give it to me. But I've got all this data. We spent the last 20 years talking about big data. I used to always shake my head at big data because we have all this data, but nobody knows how to make it relevant because you can't crunch it. Now we're at the dawn of AI, and somewhere down the line, we're also talking about supercomputers or quantum computers. That's going to be another huge jump.
Scary.
So now the question is, we spent so much money in getting this data. When are we finally going to use it? And when is it going to empower us and offer us value? And that's where I think AI should be on the forefront, and it is on the forefront.
It is.
I just don't think most people understand how the building blocks go. What comes first? What comes second? Yeah.
So this using the historical that many companies have of data in many different areas. Is exactly that level 2 to level 3 stage that we were talking about earlier, right? So you'd first prioritize for example, risk management, right? There's a lot out there using AI for risk management. There's a lot of data that we have, all the historicals of risk registers from past projects, whatever. All that stuff there can absolutely help you in your next project. But what are you going to do? Go read through the risk registers by hand? What are you going to do? I mean, so there for sure AI can help, and that's a level 2 step. That's a level 2 step. Right?
Okay.
Because it's separate. Imagine that fails, it doesn't impact the rest of your company. You just go back to doing your risk registers the way you're doing them now. But very powerful from that perspective, from the perspective of that value stream itself. And you can do a couple of these value streams, right? And invest on these.
You can do earned value with it, because one of the reasons why earned value fails is because we either don't have the resources or the time or the inclination to chunk down our projects and plan it with that level of accuracy. And then to track it is a nightmare as well. If we can automate that, that would be another example.
So there's earned value, very interesting. I've seen a couple of projects that used it very effectively, and I've seen a huge amount that totally failed. And usually the reason for which they fail is because they lack an ability to estimate percentage of completion of their activities, and therefore the whole earned value system just flies out of the window. Forget about it.
Well, I've seen guidelines there though. There's workaround. I know one company that's a little bit over the top that says it's either 0 or 100%. Because it's software. That's ridiculous.
Exactly. If you have a lot of very tiny packages, then okay. But but you're completely right. There are guidelines. Essentially, you swap accuracy for objectivity, and you are able to do
There's a trade-off.
There's a trade-off. But in any case, the point is you need to do that. And yes, you're completely right. There is knowledge that AI can help with there. So, for example, evaluating the correct level of percentage of completion for different stages of your
if you give it a guideline on how to estimate it, then it could probably do a lot for it. You might have to once again double check, but
you'll have to double check the calculations, but it will give you principles on how the guidelines themselves it will help you create, right? Because at the moment, what we have is very rough guidelines. This type of, if you have a monitoring and controlling work package, if you have a tiny work package, whatever, the AI will fine-tune those approaches to the single specific work package and give you much more reliable approach to calculating the percentage of completion. Then, do you want it to calculate it or do you want to calculate it yourself is another issue, but it'll come up with the mechanism.
Can I throw in a curveball here? It's a little bit out of place, but it's something that I picked up recently. There's since the beginning of the year, actually starting last year, there's quite a substantial number of industries that are laying off people, which I find interesting because for the longest time we've been hearing you can't get resources, and now certain industries have been laying off, and I think it's out of uncertainty of the future. Okay, because most of these positions that are being laid off are IT people. Okay, there's a large bank in Austria that belongs to an Italian bank. I think they're laying off, I don't know, if it's 1,000 plus or something, and there's a huge pushback. Based on my experience of working with some of these clients, I don't think it's an issue that they don't need the resources. I think it's a kind of reflexive approach of I'm going to make a daring statement here of board members that say, listen, AI is here. We don't know how it works, but this is what we've heard that it can do. It can reduce our legal costs. It can reduce our IT costs because we have now the AI can do our programming. So I think to communicate outwardly that they're doing something with AI, which they're not sufficiently, okay? They're preventatively, so it looks good on the books, laying off a bunch of workers, okay? So that they can say, we're laying them off because AI, okay? My question to you would be, because this is where I think there's a lot of resistance to AI, I think a lot of people are afraid that AI is coming for their job. I mean, theoretically, it could be coming for our job as well, as a consultant or trainers, right?
It will change it. Yeah.
Question
is, by the way, we could talk about that.
Yeah, we should talk about that. So that's where my question goes. Do you see, is AI going to take away our job?
Is this justified?
Yeah. Is it going to take away our job, or is it going to just help accelerate our job? Do you think it's going to even out because there's enough work to be done anyways?
So going back to the point that many companies are laying off, I think that there are three big categories, if you want, of reasons for which they lay off. Mm-hmm. The first one is because the CEO needs to make quick numbers.
And he wants to make a bonus.
And wants to get his bonus.
Yeah.
And this is very
classical
common.
McKinsey. Screw you, McKinsey.
This is very common, and it's totally crazy, but many people just don't care, right? They prefer
short-term benefits if it damages the company, mid-term, long-term.
Sell the family jewels, make the cash, and now you can retire.
Yeah.
Okay, let's park that way of working. We all agree that that makes no sense, but it's common.
And that's not always the case. We don't want to be so polemic, but sometimes it's the case.
Then the second category is companies that, in effect, were way too big. And
So
there's
it's a
lot of
classical
them.
cycle.
Right.
Growth.
Exactly. And it has nothing to do with AI.
Yeah.
And that is something that we are noticing post-COVID, especially that we were way too bloated. Right? And so you need to trim it down. And I'm really sorry for the guys who get laid off, because obviously it's not their fault or anything, but if a company is bloated, it's bloated, right? What are you going to do? Either you increase your sales.
And it's often an opportunity. I mean, we all went through different job cycles as well. It's often an opportunity to reorient yourself and find maybe a company that really wants you. It's a different working for a big company where you're safe, but it's boring work, or you're working for a little bit more a company where you're really needed.
Look, you're completely right, Mark. I mean, the attitude of needing safety, which is so prevalent in even in corporate environments, is motivated by fear. I work until I'm not afraid anymore. Right? Now, in order to overcome this, there's only one way. And that is to acknowledge the fact that lack of safety can actually
be an opportunity.
Very
good. I like that.
And that's the only way to grow beyond this need for safety. If someone comes and pampers you and tells you you are safe, I will never fire you, you're not growing beyond that. You're not growing. You're going to still need safety, and you're going to still be motivated by fear. Only there's no fear, so you're not working.
I would just throw in, I think a lot of these companies are, I would understand if they're bloated, then it's legitimate. But I think some of these companies are a little bit premature in laying off their
and that's
employees.
The third category.
Because they're going to need them.
They're going to need them.
They might have to retrain them, but they're going to need them. If they're going to digest these 1, 2, 3 levels here, that's a lot of work.
Right. Yeah. No, absolutely. Now, do you retrain the existing employees? Do you actually need to swap them out? That depends on the employees you've trained. I mean, did you create a culture of learning? Or did you create a culture of I sit on my ass and I do whatever you tell me to do? Right? Now, if you created a culture inside your organization of people that are unable to learn the next step, then you need to change the culture of the organization, and that might mean laying off a bunch of people. On the other hand, if you've created an organization where people are excited about the next new thing, then you
I think that's also interesting, and I think the lot of fear there is. And I don't think there's. I know there's a lot of online training, and I've looked at some of it, but most of it is dismal. It's pathetic. It's a lot of fluff, a lot of blah blah. It's confusing more than it is clarifying. I think there needs to be more information, because you said there's a lot of information, but there needs to be more information that creates clarity also for the individual. Okay, this is a change in our society. How do I get on board?
Right.
I think that would be interesting. You'd mentioned something beforehand that I don't even think that our listeners maybe even heard. You used the word PMR2.
Very important.
Yeah. What the heck is that? We're not going to let you off the hook before you, because we're going to go a little bit more into depth. We're going to see more of your application. What are some of the use cases that you're using, or some of the products you're developing? What is PMR2?
Well, when I saw this whole change, I decided that, if someone's going to take my job, I want it to be me.
Yeah. It's called self-cannibalization.
Absolutely.
Yes, absolutely. I'm a big fan of that. Yeah.
And so I created this company that creates solutions, AI-based solutions for project managers.
Awesome.
Not for huge companies that need a solution.
So you don't need 10 million to get involved with It's cheaper than 10 million.
Absolutely. I mean, I'll take the 10 million, but
I'm not a commission.
I'm not in competition with Microsoft.
Yeah.
Right? But the point is,
but let's you're joking, but I think that's you're not joking, because I think that's one of the beauties of our new technology is that there's a certain level of democratization on the market. It used to be, if you wanted to do something that created this kind of value, you needed to have an invest of millions. Yeah. Right?
That's right.
Now you need a computer, you need some simple tools, and you need some concept in your head, and you can compete with the big boys, maybe not on their scale, but there's many scales to operate on.
Right.
And quite honestly, most small and medium-sized enterprises are not going to be able to afford the big boys. So are there options on a lower level? Talk about what some of your solutions are.
Yeah. So by the way, there are companies that have invested the billions creating the large language models that now I get to use for a cheap token price, right? And the very first tool that we've created is the easiest one.
Okay.
Right? We decided we're going to start. Absolutely, level one. We're going to start with something where there is no risk relative to IP. You don't need to put in your private data or whatever. And there's a lot of people out there who badly need help.
Okay.
Right? And that is to take. You've done your PMP. You know what it is about. You teach it. You train it. You
nightmare sometimes.
Now you know the nightmare. And how often does it happen that people call you, I put in B into the simulator and it says C and I don't understand
know why.
Right? Yeah. So now you can. Now you just put it in there and say, why is this wrong? Right?
So it's a tutorial application.
It's something that takes your hand and brings you across the preparation.
That's brilliant.
And helps you to converse with the questions rather than just see if you got it right? I got it wrong, but why did I get it wrong?
I think anybody who trains a PMP, and you've done it yourself, there's so much information you have to crunch and digest, help them digest. But it's a lot of rote memory, and to create that bridge that cognitive gap. The only way, this is what I tell people, if you want to prepare for the PMP, the only way you can really do it besides swallowing all the content is to take the questions over and over and over again until your brain shuts off, right? And you intuitively know, I can feel the question, I understand what they're actually asking. Because even for native speakers, the exam is sometimes a nightmare.
Difficult, yeah.
And what you're saying is, but no trainer has, because I mean, literally you can spend weeks and weeks and weeks and weeks preparing somebody, and that's not well invested time for either party. Yeah. So if you can give them a quasi mentor or coach or whatever you want to call it, or tutor, probably a better word for it, an electronic tutor where you can say, I'm answering the question, and you say, but why is this? And it'll reference it. And it has the patience to do that repetition that would be exhausting for you or me.
And it'll explain it to you. And if you say, I don't get it, can you explain it in simpler terms? It'll re-explain it. You tell it, can you explain it to me in Italian? It'll tell you in Italian, right?
So in different languages too.
Oh, absolutely.
Awesome. Yeah. So and this already exists.
This already exists.
You can find us on your website.
Yeah.
Oh, so in the link.
Yeah.
Okay. So and you've already had some success with it. You've already sold it to a number of licenses to several companies. Those are companies that provide PMP training.
I've used it with Swiss Management Training, absolutely, and we've done several classes with it.
Okay.
And so far, so good.
Good.
And it's improving. I mean, every new version is.
You mentioned that before we started the podcast. The only way to make something like that work is if you're constantly doing plan, do, check, act, plan, do, check, act.
Absolutely.
Okay.
Right. Every new version must be better than the one before, right? So it cannot. It's a constant growth. I mean, you cannot stop. Okay. So we are, for example, adding games to it.
Good.
We are adding keywording to it. However, this is one tool. This is the one that's on the market now.
That's easy to understand. What other tools do you have?
Oh, by the way, there are some free GPTs on the website.
Okay.
That because you were curious as how do you use GPT-4, right?
Okay.
Or ChatGPT, and we created a few GPTs that help you, for example, take notes. Right?
Okay.
So you can just talk to it and and you give it your thoughts, and he is an active listener, so he asks these open-ended questions to help you.
But he won't call you an idiot.
But he won't call you an idiot. Exactly, And he coaxes you, right?
Good.
And then when you tell it, okay, summarize. Good. Then he summarizes everything you've said, and then tells you, I find the main points that you have of these.
I actually think when both my kids are studying, I think they're living in such a wonderful world where they can theoretically, if they have some kind of electronic device, sit in their lecture and it'll record it and take notes for them and break it down into a framework and ask them questions. Brilliant.
Yeah, sure.
Yeah. We wish we would have that.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I mean, if you have a bunch of stupid ideas, they're going to stay stupid even once GPT is repeated. Yeah. Who knows? Maybe he'll correct them for you. Yeah. But in any case, so that's there are these free GPTs already out there, plus the tool that you have. But in the pipeline, there's a bunch of other stuff. Right?
Like make us hungry.
The two major groups are pedagogical tools.
Okay.
So
training?
More training related.
But not just PMP, the way beyond that.
Risk management. Yeah, there's a bunch of stuff. Change management.
Yeah.
My focus, as I've said several times, is project management. Right?
Okay, yeah.
So from that perspective, but all there's a lot of very interesting stuff.
Okay.
And the second one instead is project managers, right? Real tools that can help project managers not to do everything, right? If you look at specific tools now, ChapGPT itself, but Copilot or whatever, they help you to do everything that you're doing. Instead, these are specific for specific tools.
Makes them probably more functional than in some areas.
I need to write a proper project charter. Right? So what do I have to do? And it guides you through it. Right? I need to do a proper stakeholder analysis. So when we do stakeholder analysis, what happens? You do a stakeholder analysis, then when you get bored, you stop. Right? And that's where the tool says, you're not done yet. Right?
Actually, I'm going to pick this up. My very first guest that I had on the podcast, one of my favorite PM Cowboys, Wolfgang Raschke. Hi, shout out to Wolfgang. He was famous because he had a legal background and was responsible for risk, and then took over the PMO for CE for Siemens for many years. Now he's staff position to the board. But he originally, when he came into office first, he had them, I think they spent weeks back then creating one of the biggest Excel sheets that I'd ever seen. It was a beautiful, I have a copy of it, risk analysis with multi-function point questions, and they would evaluate what type of project. It had, I think, like 24 different folders and a risk register. It was amazing. It took them weeks to put together with a bunch of macros.
Gets parked.
But the number one feedback was great, but I'm going to fill this out once, if at all, and then never again, which is the negative trade-off, because the key, one of the benefits of simple stakeholder analysis and risk analysis is that you're more likely to do them.
And that's exactly you can do
But then you lose the value of doing it in greater depth. And what you're saying is now AI will help you bridge some of that.
Sure. Exactly. You still have the depth, but it's easy to use. Because what you don't want to have is spend weeks doing a great work, then you park it in your library and you finally start working. And you forget about that until something goes wrong and they tell you, but didn't we have it? Oh yeah, we did have it in the risk register. But you didn't do anything. The whole point of risk management is not that you've foreseen great risks. The point is that you are running a different project. You are doing different things because you analyzed your risk.
You know what it hit me like a ton of bricks, and it's so obvious. Sometimes it's the most obvious things for us, but you have to hear it, I think, often until the ice breaks. The ton of bricks that hit me was one of these hidden discussions that has always been ignored because nobody understands the essential need for administration or even middle management. Is one of the biggest problems that project managers have had in the past is the scope of project management is both technical in nature, what's called product scope, and project management scope. And project management scope can be broken down into multiple tasks, such as filling out templates and all this administrative stuff, this attention to detail that you might kind of put off. But we all know what happens if you don't have it. If you don't have agendas for your meetings, if there's no protocol, if there's no action on it, if nobody follows up with the product backlog, if there's not clear, and nobody fills out the risk register, all of this has a negative impact. But we've always kind of like left it in the shadow. We've ignored it. And what I'm kind of and this has always been on the forefront of my mind, but now in connection with AI, I'm thinking actually this could be the aid, okay, that could help us cover a lot of these things that were usually time consuming and would take us away from like strategic work or the bigger picture.
You have an artificial project coordinator.
Yeah. So a project assistant.
Yep.
Yeah. I'm not saying it'll replace all project assistants. By the way, Nelly during the break had mentioned that she said, based on her opinion, you want to say it? What do we still have open? The cliffhanger that we had open is whether we have to be afraid for your jobs. What was your statement? What was your answer?
So the question was, will AI take our jobs? Some, yeah, sure.
Okay.
Some jobs it will take.
Yeah. Will it take our jobs?
Okay. So I think it's going to change our jobs. Yeah. And some of us are going to have to find something else to do. Okay. That's for sure. Mm-hmm. So if you're, let's say, a trainer, if you're a trainer and the only thing you want to do is stand in front of a class and explain stuff that honestly they could have read a book, then yeah, you're going to have to find a new job.
Yeah.
And thank God for that.
Yeah.
However, what I really am afraid of.
So you're saying for rote memory, which means kind of just memorizing stuff, an AI can do that equally as good and like in 12 or 150 different languages?
Maybe not today, but 2 years from now, yeah.
But you're saying when it comes to real cognitive experience, sharing, use cases, how to, we still have one up, at least for a while?
The AI will be able to do much of that as well.
Yeah.
The question is rather, so take COVID, for example, right? What happened? We had in-person classes, and we knew we had the technology to do most of these classes also remotely. We had it.
Yeah, we never wanted to do it because we
didn't really like the idea. But when companies said, "Hey, I need to reduce costs," well, that was one of the options, and we said, rather
even if they didn't want to reduce costs, but they wanted to have training, but we couldn't do it in person, they said, "Well, this is the alternative,"
right?
And we all learned it works.
But before COVID, the customers reacted, no, we want the thing. Okay, cool. Because we all knew that there's a jump of quality, right? We need to reduce quality for that. Good. COVID came along, we were obliged to do it. Now they realize that it's a hell of a lot cheaper and it kind of works anyway. Yeah. Is there a reduction in quality? Yes, of course.
There's a trade-off.
Everybody.
What's your estimate right now? I would say about 50% are still online and the rest are in person. That's my experience.
Right. I would say that at least that. Yeah. However, what does that mean? We didn't manage this change, right? What we enabled was simply the fact that companies at the end let finance and control decide what's going to happen with the courses. And so at the end of the day, they got used to it. It's cheaper. We continue this way. I'm afraid that the same thing might happen with AI. That at the end of the day, it's a hell of a lot cheaper to have an avatar tell you whatever you put in there, and that will take the role of the trainer away. So the point is not so much to ask the question, could it substitute the trainer? The question is, what are we going to do about it? How are we going to make sure that we stay relevant? If we let only finance decide, the trainers are gone. Even though we all know the quality is going to be lower. But what is the alternative? And this is where many of the tools that I was telling you about come in. We create tools where the AI helps with the training, does the explanation. If you have questions, you can ask. But you have a real human trainer that acts as a coach of a big number of people and accompanies them through the learning path, right? So it's not, the role of the trainer has changed. Now you don't have a class anymore, you don't necessarily have a class, or you blend it, you bring in a few classes and others instead are done using AI. But you
might actually make your trainings more of a workshop nature where you say, okay, now we're going to take what you've learned and we're going to actually maybe based on your use cases go into detail.
You're going to make them real life nature.
Yeah.
You're going to embed the learning into the real work that people are doing day in, day out. I have this problem. What do I do? Flash. What about a charter? I have this other problem. Oh, my customer they've just changed the marketing manager. What do we do? Whoa, did you do a stakeholder analysis? So you bring the learning, thanks to AI, a real trainer could never do that. You bring the real learning into the real life.
Yeah.
But you can't bring it all together if you just rely on the AI. So you will need a trainer who accompanies you, maybe for 6 months, maybe for a year, and accompanies your learning path, right? So I am a junior project manager. I want to be a much more senior project manager 2 years from now. So you as a trainer, you might have a group of 20, 30, 40 employees of your customer whom you're accompanying through this learning path, which is then facilitated through AI. So this is how I see the role evolving rather than disappearing.
Okay.
If we take ownership of it, if we create the tools and if we create the spaces for this coaching type of role, if we don't, forget about it. Yeah. Money was going to count.
Forget about it.
Absolutely.
Actually,
the decisions will be taken on
before
cash.
the podcast, I have my favorite team back here, Rico and Nelly, that don't just do my social media and the filming and all that kind of stuff. But they're also great listeners and have great questions. And Nelly, you had a brilliant, you remember which question it was? Yeah. You had a brilliant question. I forget what the terminology is. I think it would be the right place to ask that question. You want to share that question? So what she's basically saying is, this is what the simpler version of that would be, we use ChapGPT to write our letters, and then you can use ChapGPT to read the letter that's sent to you, and the communication is lost because now people are not doing anything. They're just leaving it to ChapGPT, and before you know it, we can all go into retirement, and ChapGPT will have conversations with each other. So the question was the concept of the dead internet, which is that concept that if we
gets overloaded by
we
artificial
let AI
information.
do everything and everything is artificial, because quite honestly, this is my personal thing, but this will change with generation. I don't want to participate in a training where I can sense that it's not a real person training. That's my feeling. I'm old school.
I don't think so.
Yeah.
I think you'll love it.
Yeah.
Yeah. But of course,
look deep in my eyes.
No, I think you'll love it because it's not going to look anything like the trainings that we do. So you're not going to have it clearly, if all you have is an avatar talking to you for 3 days straight, that's not going to fly.
Yeah, I think quite honestly, those avatar solutions at this stage are no better than real people doing online training, which is just as boring.
Is already bad,
because they got to stick up their wazoo and they're speaking like non-humans, and I might as well have an avatar.
Right, exactly.
But I'm talking about the animation that I get from a real Italian like you waving his hands. I'm not going to have.
But that's why you need the coach. Exactly. That's exactly right? Hey.
Yeah.
So the point is, what if the avatar or the AI or the bot or whatever just appears when you need it for 10 minutes to explain a concept? So that's not a class anymore.
Yeah.
That's accompanying you through your real life.
Yeah.
And in the background, there's a plan as to where you need to arrive with your growth.
Yeah.
But this AI is giving you little pills of knowledge and helping you practice them. And so you grow and you develop.
Okay.
So it's a completely different form of running a training. And in parallel, you would need a human coach to give you the depth, to give you the overview, the picture, an understanding that, yes, I am making progress, or I'm frustrated because I'm not making progress. You need a human there when you're frustrated.
Do you foresee, maybe this
But
is...
we're not answering her question.
Yeah. But her question was, do you believe in the dead internet theory?
So if I understand correctly, the question was what I think about it, right? So danger? Yeah, sure. Of course, the danger is definitely there. Why shouldn't it be, right? We have bots creating tweets all the time. Will there be a solution to it? Yeah, sure. I mean, look at X. Musk is already trying to say, hey, what if we make people pay for it? That way, it's too expensive to have a huge bot farm. You can have one bot, but you can't have millions of it because it becomes too expensive. It won't be worth it anymore. So in any case, It's just an idea, right? But the question, how do we deal with these bots, is an extremely serious question. And how do we deal with fake deviations of public opinion? Because this is not even the fact that we create opinions that are fake. This is really deviating public opinion in a direction that is not solid, is not true, is not realistic, right? The danger? Yeah, sure, the danger is there. Can we do something about it? Hell yeah. I don't believe that we're not able to find solutions for it. Is it going to be difficult? Yeah, it's going to be difficult.
I think you're talking on multiple levels. That's a concern that I think everybody thinks about in some form or other. The term I'd never heard of before. I think the purpose of LinkedIn is when I, for example, do social media. I still believe that when I write a blog, I think it's still important that I write it, that it's my thought, that I might get some pointers or some structure from ChapGPT. But I think the purpose of real communication, and maybe I'm old school, maybe that'll change with a new generation, is true connection. And true connection, I think, has to be felt. I'm going to give you a weird example that my wife Monica, but she recently told me something that I found shocking. She's a general practitioner, and on the side she also deals with one of these homes that has for people who have Alzheimer's and stuff like that. Yeah. And she told me a story that I thought was fascinating. She says, talking about losing jobs, she said in the last 20 years, the number of personnel per patient has more or less been constant. But there's a growing number of patients, and there's a declining number of people who want to do the work. And one of the reasons is because although there's approximately the same ratio of service personnel to patient, they have less time for the patient. The human factor is getting lost. And the reason for it is some crazy, probably some German guys, sorry, German people, decided, EU, that when you change the diaper of an Alzheimer's patient, you have to document everything. You have to measure the stool. You have to take pictures. You have to document everything. So 50% of the work time that one of these workers has to do is wasted on computer stuff for data that nobody looks at. Okay.
Why can't they just hire some school kid to do the data part?
And that's difficult to as well. But this is the recent idea that the EU came up with. They're going to use AI. And they're going to relieve the workers so that they can do more of the work. Guess what they think that the AI should relieve them of? The interpersonal action or the computer?
So if you're telling me the bureaucrats are stupid,
no, but answer my question. What do you think that they should relieve the worker of?
Yeah, sure. They're going to bring in the automatons.
They're talking about bringing in patient robots. Yeah. Who will change diapers, and the poor workers who actually chose their job because they have a social orientation, right, are supposed to do more computer. Now, this is an example of different generations. I have to pay, because I told this to a couple Generation Z who are in IT business, and I said, "Isn't that terrible?" And one of them said, "No, I think it's a great idea." And I'm like, "What did you just say?" I think it's inhumane, because this is what these service providers say. The only thing that an Alzheimer's patient or somebody who's dement actually responds to, they don't respond to language anymore. They respond to smiles, touch, the interpersonal thing. That's what I was basically talking about. And that kind of underlies your theory, is that if we take out the human factor, why do we bother, right? But this guy, and this just shows you how the new generation thinks, not all of them, but some of them, said, no, I like that idea, because quite honestly, when I'm in that case, I don't want a human being. I find it gets me it's too personal for me if another human being is going to do the work, right? So that's two sides of an interesting discussion. Does the human factor still matter? Are we going to relinquish all of our work to AI? I think is one of those classical danger things that we see.
Honestly, I don't think I'm qualified to.
Yeah.
I can give you my feelings, but.
Yeah. I told this to a friend of mine who's a professor for economics, and he said, you know what? That fear is not new. Okay, it's since if we go through the different industrialization 1.0, 2.0, 3.0, every time there was a massive shift in the industrialization, there was always this initial fear, and there's kind of a pendulum, and it kind of evens itself out.
Who knows?
Yeah,
who knows? I mean, for sure, a certain degree of bringing in humanoid robots is going to happen. Humanoid robots are clearly growing in use. But I mean, it's not a chance. I mean, we ran out of children in the 80s. So now we're running out of people who do work.
Yeah.
I mean, anybody who had half a brain in the 80s knew that 30 years later we won't have 30-year-olds.
Yeah.
So fine, that's a fact. And so humanoid robots can certainly plug a hole somewhere, probably. But which hole, where, what makes sense, what won't make sense,
I don't want to close this subject on too dark. I think we should refocus on what I just like you said at the beginning of this podcast, everything has an upside and a downside. And you can focus on whatever. And I think this is an active game. We're on a journey, and we still have a lot of influence in what direction it's going to go. I'll give another use case example. I recently heard of an AI solution that was being used by the Canadian import and export authorities, the toll authorities, that have to, on a daily basis, look at thousands of packages where there's a poor guy who's sitting in front of a screen with an infrared screen and he's going cross-eyed by looking at stupid packages, right? They said what they've done is, a classical example in the production, they added an AI to the system that's a learning system, right? That based on parameters that are given to you can identify whether it's heroin or other smuggled goods or counterfeit watches or whatever it might be, right? And it can do it much more rapid, and it doesn't get tired. And every time the people who are illegally transporting things by post change their strategy because they figure out a new way to do it, it has a learning instrument. And this is an example for me where it says, you know what? There's so much work out there that we don't want to do in the first place, and we're not doing. I think that's the potential. I think that's the highlight of what AI can do.
Possible.
And if we can create a culture where we can coexist and we're just like internet, email, smartphones have revolutionized our world. I think AI has exactly that same potential. I think, are there some risks that we need to look at and manage along the way? Yes.
I think the risks, the real risks relative to AI lie elsewhere.
Yeah.
Right. So they lie on, do we actually know what the hell it's doing? Yeah. What is it going to do once we have AGI? Yeah. They don't lie on the social interaction with it. That's challenges.
Yeah.
And many of them will be very painful.
And AGI, I think, is level 4 or level 5, or?
In my maturity model, it's not even in there.
It's even above that?
It's not in there.
Yeah. So we've got a long way before we can have to worry about that.
Absolutely. Okay. At least that's the take at my level. Okay. Professional using the tools. Will it create social impact? For sure. Yeah.
What I like to ask, maybe this is also a change of the times, what I like to ask towards the end of my podcasts, I'm not sure whether you can answer this question, at least so that it lasts over time. I like to ask my guests, are there any books or seminars that they would recommend that could help anybody who's interested in our topic to deep dive? Have you got any?
Sure.
I'm all ears.
Change-related books, change management-related books. Kotter is a personal favorite of mine.
Okay.
So even good old classics like
these
Leading
classics.
Change.
Yeah, okay.
Absolutely. That's
yeah. Okay.
Personally,
AI wise, is there or is it just changing too rapidly?
I think currently, so now you've learned what the difference between whatever AI and machine learning and generative AI are. Okay, fine.
Yeah.
You can read that. But I mean, you open Wikipedia. Fine.
Yeah.
But AI, what I would recommend is start using it.
Yeah.
Start using it at whatever level you are. Start using it. Right?
At your company, Swiss Management Training. Do you offer training in AI?
Sure.
Okay.
Yeah, absolutely.
So that would be one. See,
Thank you. Very good. Yeah.
So
absolutely.
If since we're not going to be able to give you anything physical to buy over Amazon, but that's a different interpersonal. Reach out to Max.
Yeah. So we do, and especially at this very hands-on level. Right?
Yeah.
So absolutely. Okay. Yes. favorite of mine is systems thinking.
Yes.
And so there, if you go back to the good old classics, the fifth discipline of Senge or Theory U of Otto Scharmer. So, I mean, there's a lot of really good stuff out there that I
don't know how much time we have to go into it in full blown, but you in your Dubai session, this which was very well visited with, what do you have, over like 100 people attending?
I don't know. I think they were like 65.
Something like that, yeah. You talked about system. What was the actual title of it?
Systems thinking.
System
the title
thinking.
was something cool with systems thinking in it.
Now, I know something about it. I wouldn't claim to be an expert. I use it in my explaining of things, but my experience with system thinking is it's a brilliant concept, but I don't know if it's the wording. Maybe we need to have some marketing person work over the wording. I think a lot of people have no idea what the hell system thinking is, but I think it's still relevant for organizational development and also for the AI thought. You want to give us maybe a quick overview? What is system thinking? What's the difference between systemic, which I think is the word that most people don't understand, and systematic, because there's a big difference between the two.
They have nothing to do with each other.
Okay, yeah.
So if I'm systematic, it means I have my processes, I know what I do, I have a systematic
You have infrastructure,
way.
you have hardware, you have software, you have processes. It's mechanization, but it leaves the most important factor out, which is?
So systematic, exactly as you say, is I have a process, I have an organization in which I am a systematic person. I am a person who likes things organized, and I'm good. Well, if you go on vacation and you have everything already planned out, you're a systematic person. But it doesn't mean that you think in systems.
Mm-hmm. So what the hell is a system?
A system is, let me start the other way around, if you don't mind.
Yep.
For a million different reasons, many of which we've touched in this very interesting conversation that we've had so far, the type of work that we're doing, remember I'm interested in project management, is becoming more and more complex. For many different contextual reasons, but also for reasons that relate to our deliverables. The objectives that we have are getting bigger and bigger. So the way in which we run our projects needs to take this additional complexity in consideration. When the ancient Romans built the Colosseum, they just said, make a big ass wall, it's going to hold. You can't do that today. Today you've got to do it just right so that it holds just the right amount. So you have a much more complex way of organizing things. And maybe less beautiful too, but that's a different story. If you roll this film forward, what happens is what we have today. We have extreme complexity in a context in which we're bringing in huge diversity, by the way, also because we don't have enough people. So we bring in huge diversity. Now we need to manage that diversity. So we have complexity at different levels. Complexity of level of objectives, level of change of those objectives, level of growth, dynamic growth of the industry in which we are, internal diversity in the teams that we are collaborating with. So the complexity is growing hugely. AI can help, for sure, but the project management tools that we've been using so far are just not sufficient anymore. So what happened since the 50s, we brought in iterative and incremental design, then spiral development, then
waterfall,
the various
rolling wave,
agile, rolling wave. Then finally we had the agile. But all that is decoration. It's beautiful. It's very interesting and extremely important.
By the way, all those are iterations of the same thing.
Absolutely, absolutely.
Just
and I'm sure
words.
that you discussed it with Roy. I'm looking forward very much to listening to it. But however, we're reaching the limit also of that. So the question is, how can we create, what tools can we use, and I'm coming to systems, what tools can we use to manage higher layers of complexity?
You know what I find amazing about what you're saying is I agree with everything you're saying, but you're missing for me the key ingredient, and it kind of goes back to the question that Nelly asked about the dead internet, is for me what makes system thinking interesting versus systematic. Systematic is this classical cold management approach. This world of success and quality revolves around managing things with things, almost an AI approach. And what makes systems dynamic are partly conditions, things, the environment, but the number one factor we haven't mentioned, and that is the human factor, which makes systems exponentially more difficult to understand and manage, is the psychology of individuals and the psychology of individuals in groups.
So systems exist also without people. I mean, take whatever, the rainforest. It's a system.
Yeah. But it's a biological system, so it's alive.
It's alive.
Yeah,
absolutely.
Yeah.
That's
probably, what I'm talking about.
That's probably the key point.
I'll change my concept of saying it has to be a human, but I'm talking about an organism. I'm talking about a dynamic organism which can be assessed from a biological or psychological or pseudo-psychological perspective.
Yeah.
But has a spirit and will of itself that has a dynamic impact on the things that we're doing.
Yeah, we call those complex adaptive systems. And you're completely right. The main focus, moving away from mechanistic systems that you correctly point out is not representing us, to complex adaptive systems, you're focusing on the relationship between the parts rather than on the parts themselves. And this is exactly the point, right?
Yeah.
So if you now start looking at whatever systems by observing the interrelation between the parts, what happens is that these change. So you and I start talking, now we start talking about one thing, we get more excited, we start talking about another thing. So the way in which we interrelate changes. If you have a team you have a project, you have two people, they hate working with each other. Why? It has nothing to do with their roles, but they hate working with each other. It's not going to work out. So in any case, the relationship matters. And so you can observe a system like this and try to understand it. The bigger the system becomes, the more systems it's composed of.
While listening to you, I'm totally fascinated with the systems. I don't think systemic thinking or systems thinking is something that's so much. I think a lot of people have heard of it. I don't think most people understand it. I still think it's relevant. I think it's a hugely important topic. I think the question I would ask, and then I would like to maybe close out the system thinking concept, not because I don't want to go into it, but I think we've had a long session.
It's really huge.
And I want to give it full respect and time. So maybe we can do a rescheduling. Okay?
Sure.
But let me ask you a question. Is this attraction to system thinking, is it a byproduct of your two passions, your primary passion, project management, where the human factor always plays a role? So there is a systemic concept there. And I would assume because of that the AI is an exacerbating or additional aspect which triggers that systemic thinking. Is there a link between the two?
The other way around.
The other way around?
Yeah.
Say it in your words.
I've always been interested in systems dynamics.
Okay.
But I'm talking since I was a kid.
Yeah.
I didn't even know project management existed. Mm-hmm. The moment I started working in project management, it was obvious to me that this is not a mechanical system. All those useless job descriptions are a joke.
Yeah.
This is
human.
Yeah. And so this is systems.
As a human dynamic.
Absolutely. And so what you're interested in is reinforcing loops, balancing loops, delays, all the usual stuff that you have in systems dynamics. And there I became interested in project management. And therefore, I became interested in artificial intelligence. But honestly, artificial intelligence, to me, is not the key point for me. Mm. For me, artificial intelligence is a cooler email. Okay? It's a cool tool that I add on and I use in order to empower my systems thinking and my running my projects.
I'm going to say, you've said this now 3 times, and I've heard you all 3 times, but I still think it's great that you mentioned it 3 times for those who didn't pick it up. Sometimes when you hear something, you don't hear it and you don't understand it and you don't agree with it. But what I like about what you're saying is I think you're taking away some of the anxiety that people might have with a concept that says, listen, is AI going to replace this? And you say, listen, I like AI, I want to use it, but I have higher loves, and their higher loves is project management and system thinking. What I'd like to do is I'd like to extend to you an invitation. I'd like to go through the system thinking with you, but I think we've expanded over the time that for the attention span. I'd like to invite you back where we go through it in a structured fashion so that we can maybe finally explain it to those people who've always heard it but didn't understand it.
But this time, you come visit me.
No problem. We can do that.
Okay, very good. You prefer Klagenfurt or Rome?
Klagenfurt is probably easier for the three of us. It's closer for us three.
Okay, very good.
So
Sounds good.
We up for it?
Okay, very good. Sounds good.
We'll plan that. And we have one more. We have any questions from Rico or Nelly? I think, Nelly, you still had a question. Question is, what AI tools do you use?
Okay, very good. Now, beyond ChapGPT, I clearly use ChapGPT Pro, and that's a very important tool. I do not use Copilot. I've tested it. I liked it. I found it fun, but honestly...
It's not there yet?
No, it is there. It is there. It just doesn't do the type of things that I really care. I'm not a big Office user or whatever. The tools that I use are, of course, my tools. Right. So the various, for example, the note taker I mentioned earlier. I am constantly talking to my note taker and letting it feed back to me my own thoughts. Okay. Right. And that
it tells you what you think.
It tells me what I think. Exactly. That's exactly what it does. Right. I talk to it for half an hour. I let it ask questions, and then I let it summarize what I said. And sometimes I notice that, wait a minute, this doesn't make sense. Right.
Does it tell you that when it doesn't make sense? Not yet.
And it's too kind for that. It's too polite. Right? It doesn't tell me, look, you stupid. But anyway.
Che cosa fai?
Esatto, bravo, ma che sta fa? That's exactly right. However, it does bring it to the surface, and for me that is very useful.
Okay.
The other tool that I use very much is in the back end of the PMP training tool that I was mentioning. There, it's me as a trainer. The class is using the normal simulator with the AI interaction and the conversations and asking questions. I get feedback in the back end as to what their progress is.
Okay.
And that I use a lot in order to be able to go back to them and say, hey, do you want to have a look at this? Do you want to have a look at that?
Okay. Yeah. Good. Max, this has been, I think, one of our longest podcasts, but it went by in a blink of an eye.
There's a lot on the plate.
Yeah. I don't think we would in any form or fashion believe or estimate now that we've covered AI so that everybody's questions are answered. But I hope for the viewers we've maybe given you some food for thought, maybe answered a couple of your questions, maybe taking away some of your fears, maybe giving you some fears. I don't know.
And they might have questions, right? They might have questions that are interesting, maybe questions that we didn't think about, right? Or considerations that we didn't.
Write them in the chat. Do you want them to write to your AI or to you personally?
No, put them into the chat, and then you will share them with me.
I will share it. Definitely. Max, it's been an absolute pleasure, and I look forward to our continued interaction. Thanks a lot for your time.
Thank you.
And thanks for all the viewers out there that are continuing to watch us and follow us.
Thanks.
Till next time. Thanks.